Professor Gerdes, it's great to see you today.
Thanks for having me.
So you have a hugely popular YouTube channel, Professor Gerdes Explains, and you are following very carefully what's going on in Ukraine and what's happening globally. And the entire situation right now seems incredibly complicated, and there's a lot of pieces working, not necessarily, though, in tandem. And that's why things are a little bit out of whack. What do you make of the current situation?
So it's really almost a comedy of errors on both sides. And so what I mean by that, let's roll back the clock just a few days to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting. This is this great assembly of mostly authoritarians from the region that are getting together and cursing the West and saying that we're going to be the alternative. But really, if you take China out of the mix, their GDP is like this big, right? And they get together and say, we're going to be this counterbalance to the West, but they really don't trust each other. I mean, they don't trust each other to the degree that Kim Jong-un was actually bringing his own toilet so that they couldn't get DNA samples, and they were wiping things down. Did you hear about the North Korean and Russian security guys that almost got into a fist fight over the AC?
Tell me about it.
Putin wanted,
yeah, I'm sure it was a disaster like everything else. Let's hear it.
Putin wanted it at like I don't know what Celsius is. I'm making stuff up now. 30, and Kim wanted it at 33 or vice versa. Whatever it was, they were like these security people were actually fighting over it. Okay, that's almost a microcosm of what the whole thing is like. Like the whole thing, like they don't trust each other. They hate the West, but they don't trust each other. So, you know, a BRICS, and I know that Shanghai cooperation isn't a BRICS, but like a BRICS currency or something like that, I just don't see coming down the pike anytime soon. Although, you know, it is interesting. Shanghai cooperation, if they pegged it to Chinese yuan, and yuan used to be at least pegged to the dollar, you could almost do something with that, but they got off the dollar and have it as a bundle of you know, other market securities or something now. I don't know how it's pegged, but yeah, so they're a mess over there, and then they have their parade to scream how powerful they are. I don't know about you, but I was talking to my kids. We were coming back from a karate class tonight, right? And I was telling them, like, I've never met a black belt who wasn't a nice guy. I have a black belt. I have a brown belt in judo, and brown in aikido, and a black in taekwondo, and so I've never met a not nice black belt. I've met a lot of really jerky green belts though, and where I'm going with that is this: that like it strikes me that like China was just trying too hard with that parade, and they're showing how tough they are. And Che Bao's is talking about how awesome China is compared to the U.S. parade. I like the U.S. parade. They were throwing candy from the tanks. That's U.S. culture. That's you understand what I'm saying? Like, you don't have to try to pretend you're all big and bad if you are actually all big and bad. So yeah, so that was where the SCO was. Then you look over to what happened in Europe, and that was a train wreck in and of itself. Okay, not as bad of a train wreck, but I mean, like the SCO was never going to actually work together in a meaningful way, even though they're trying to do that. But then Europe happens, and Zelensky meets with the Nordic 8, and then he meets in Paris with some other Europeans, and then Trump. What does Trump say? He's going to lay down the law. You must not be buying this oil from Russia, Europe. Like, what? Like, I mean, that's what happened with Trump. It was like really bizarre. Like, okay, there's no 2 weeks, but there's no sanctions, which have been promised now, I think 8 times. I could be wrong, but I think it was like 8 extensions of the deadline. So they're jacked up, but we're jacked up. But the only thing that I see is that like we're all jacked up. Like nobody's doing this well. Like nobody's getting any progress because everybody's just not working well. That's what I see.
There is that silver lining, is that it's not just us, it's also them who things are working out very badly for. So we do have that going for us. And it is, in fact, something that the Ukrainians are quite worried by. When I'm in Kiev, getting these phone calls from TV stations or radio stations to discuss what's going on, they often ask about that. Is there a strategy to this? Does the U.S. actually have a plan that they're hiding from the public? And I think it's very clear to everybody that there is no plan. There is no strategy. And every day it's just a mystery what will happen next. But that's actually sort of a point of concern, because as this continues to go on like this, it gives time for, one, the front lines to get more dangerous.
Yeah.
We see that the Russians right now are amassing more troops. It looks like they might be planning another offensive. Now, keep in mind, their summer offensive went very, very badly. They didn't take a major city. They didn't take a major town even. And in the course of this, they had 210,000 casualties, which is a lot of men killed or injured to gain nothing. So when you look at that, I don't think things are going to be going their way. And within Russia itself, there's other problems. We see that increasingly in the infighting between the military and the FSB, there's 6 times more generals being arrested now than there was prior to 2022. And to put this in comparison, when we talk of more than a dozen generals being arrested, and we're getting higher and higher in the numbers every month, what's interesting about that is how many U.S. generals have been arrested in the last 5 years? You want to take a guess?
That's a really good question.
Zero.
That's actually really, really interesting. Like they do it to themselves, and they've done it to themselves before, right? They talk about so one of the things that happened at Shanghai was that they were talking about how we're the winners of World War II. Actually, kind of China. You're the guys that fought off the guys that won World War II in China. Like you're the government that overthrew the nationalists that were fighting. Oh, but okay, details. But in Russia's case, like Russia likes to talk about how in the Great Patriotic War they lost so many people. First, you lost lots of people who weren't Russian. Let's put that as part one. But then two, you lost so many people because you lopped off all the generals because Stalin was paranoid. It's like the same. It's like history repeating again. That we're seeing that same kind of thing, and it's not just generals either. It's a lot of like CEOs and vice presidents of major companies that aren't doing so hot and or are about to be nationalized or that sort of thing. So it's really weird to watch.
Oh, it's really weird to watch. But I wonder how they are watching this. And the Chinese specifically, I don't agree with the assessment that they want to help the Russians really in a direct way for a lot of reasons. One, it helps them to see the Russians get degraded, that their military is falling apart. Keep in mind, Russia's own intelligence service, the FSB, and actually the SVR as well, which is the external intelligence service, it has qualified China as being the greatest threat to Russian national security, which is interesting. Because they publicly like to say that we're allies, we're pals, we'll work together. But when push comes to shove, what does that mean? Will China, for instance, be willing to just go all out and buy Russian sanctioned goods, which then means the destruction of the Chinese economy? I seriously doubt it. And in fact, I just heard earlier today that the Chinese, it appears, did not sign the agreement to build the pipeline with Russia. Now, Putin had said that they signed it, but it appears that they may not have.
Well, okay, so if I understand it correctly with that, they kind of signed that they're going to do something, but they haven't actually signed the thing to work out the details, but they gave a victory lap that we're going to do this, but nothing's actually set in stone. And it's a lot worse to try to pipe the gas from all the way up in the northwest of Russia, all the way across Russia to China than it is to just right there to Europe. So and China's going to have them over a barrel. As far as pricing, because they're going to, like what we're seeing right now, it's like I said, history is repeating itself. We're seeing mercantilism, except now Shanghai is the master and Moscow is the servant. And it's working. And I borrowed that, by the way, from a professor from University of California at San Diego, Bratislav Sanchelev. I can't remember how to pronounce his last name, Sanchelev or whatever, but it was his idea. And I was like, whoa, that's right. That's exactly what we're seeing. He pointed that out. And you're seeing them like I said for the last 2 years, like you've seen like Russia and China, and it's slowly kind of shifted where China has just become the master and Russia's becoming the still seems to think that he's the guy, like he's got the upper hand. It's very weird to watch.
It's very weird to watch. But what do you make of it? What's going on in Ukraine right now, and how is it going to be impacted by all of this? I think that overall, except for being a lot of cause for nerves in Ukraine, where people are very worried about what's going to happen, they're unsure what this all means. And I think that's a very justified concern, considering not really as much that I think the Chinese will align with the Russians or something like this, but the U.S. side is so divided. The U.S. side is so totally unclear as to what's happening, which is something that brings me to a totally different topic, but related, is that I still don't understand why the U.S. is in charge of the negotiations, because inherently The president has said a number of times that the U.S. should not be involved. It wants to be disengaged. It doesn't want to spend its money on this, which is fine. If it doesn't want to be involved, then get out of the way. Let the Europeans then handle negotiations. Why is the U.S. involved in this? I quite literally don't understand.
So I just started reading Elbridge Colby's book. So I'm trying to understand like why we're thinking about the China so much in the Pacific and focusing on that and that sort of thing. Okay, so let's say, and that is U.S. military doctrine to focus, to pivot toward what's going to happen in Asia and the Pacific. I get that. So there's two schools of thought. One is just shift there, and this is what he's saying in his book, just shift there and don't let anything else get in the way and focus exclusively on that. And I'm of the other opinion, I'm sure you are as well, which is like tamp this down in Ukraine, and then Xi is a lot less likely to get antsy about trying to take Taiwan, right? I mean, if you showed enough strength and support, then it would make it less likely. Okay, so why are we involved at all? Like who appointed who appointed Trump to be in charge of the negotiations? No one. It's just that he has power because of the United States and can, give or sell or whatever else. But he doesn't really still want to be there. He just wants his Nobel, and he doesn't really, it seems to me, this is my commentary. This is not like fact that I'm quoting now, but it seems to me he doesn't really care how it ends as long as he ends it with a peace and gets a Nobel Prize. I could be wrong. But that's my view, and I'm a Republican, right? I don't want it to be like this. I want to see American strength projected, right? Just like to keep people who would do bad things at bay, not wanting to get a little trying to feel their strength. I don't think Trump has a plan, or if it has a plan, it's such a guarded secret he doesn't know what it is. So, that's my read now. And so he's hoping that something fortuitously happens here between now and whenever that is. But I think he's coming to recognize, and you're seeing in statements like they're just going to need to fight it out for some time. And I think the Ukrainians are of that mind, like, okay, well, regardless of what you do here, we've got Russians to go stop, and they're going to just keep doing that.
I think which is a better priority. But it is sort of funny, the Russians this whole time, how much of this has just been cloak and dagger. You remember right before the talks began and the trip in Alaska began, there was a break in the Ukrainian lines. They made a huge deal about this, how they went kilometers and kilometers deep. But it turned out it was really just about taking photos. They had a group of guys that went in, took some photos, put up Russian flags, and then they got liquidated. But there was no massive break. It wasn't like there's thousands of Russian soldiers pouring into Ukraine. And they've done that now a couple of times in the recent past, which makes it look like the Russians are doing what they can to impress upon the Americans that, look, Russia's clearly winning. It's time to end this. It's better to end it now in the interest of Ukraine, to give them some of their territory than none of their territory. But I don't know if it's really been effective. But either way, it's very hard to understand what the Russians are thinking, given the fact that they are having no tangible gains. Just incredible losses with no tangible gains. But I think overall the situation in Russia itself, though, is getting more and more complicated. Something you and I have discussed before. The economy is having serious problems, and the Kremlin's having serious problems. No matter where you look, the Kremlin is in a very bad way. And increasingly, and I do seriously believe, that the country is getting more and more destabilized. The fighting that's going on between Rosgvardia, which is the Russian National Guard, and with the FSB, which is the intelligence service, is high. The FSB is arresting generals from the military. We see at the same time that the Chechens are not getting along with the military very well, or with the intelligence service. No matter where you look, nobody's really getting along with each other. They are fighting and conflicting more and more and more. And the interesting part, Vladimir Putin is in his bubble. He doesn't seem to be aware of the fact the situation is getting so bad. He's just detached from the reality of his own country. And that's a very good thing, because that allows for the situation to get more and more out of control. But have you been following this?
I would argue with that last characterization, and I would add to it. So I don't think he's detached so much as being fed wrong information from people who have every incentive to tell the boss good news all the way up the chain, right? Mm-hmm. So here, 3 people were killed. It goes to the boss, 10 people were killed. It goes to that boss, 100 people are killed. 500 people are killed, and then that's what the report that Putin might get. It's that sort of thing. Because that's a kind of system that they're in. So I'm not saying that those specifics, but that's the kind of thing that happens in an authoritarian system. You just get good information up the chain. Otherwise, you're not going to last all that long. And so he's not detached so much as ill-informed because the system ill-informs him. Like you would think it would be great to have dictatorial power. It's really not. And that's where he is. Add to all those troubles that you had, the economy. I just did a video today that was just going back over 1 week in the economy, and it'll curl your hair, just all the things that are going wrong within the Russian economy. And I'm glad. I mean, I want the Russian economy to seize and not be able to do the military things that they're doing. But, when the railway isn't working right and the steel production isn't right and, the gas isn't there because of the refinery hits, all these things cumulatively add up and clog up the work so that they're not able to bring the force to bear that they're trying to bring to bear against the Ukrainians. So I know that they're trying to mass 100,000 Russians somewhere near Pokrovsk to try to attack. I just don't know how you actually get through there. I mean, Pokrovsk is hard. It's a dangerous place. Ukrainians are dying. I mean, that is true. I get it. But there's like a wall of drones. It's like a minefield in the sky. And even if you were to bring tanks, those armored columns like that didn't stand up well to javelins. How there's so much more in danger when you're trying to stand up to a wall of drones that are just flying in and dropping stuff on you left and right, and then they just clog up the system. So I just don't know how they plan to get there. But didn't we just see another Putin deadline for when he was supposed to take all of Donetsk or all of whatever? Like it was like supposed to be 60 days that he was going to have 60 days to take it all, right? That just came and went.
Where is it?
Nothing happened. So it's the same stuff all over again. Like, and Putin just keeps setting arbitrary deadlines that's not going to actually change anything. I think the summer offensive was terrible, right? Sumy was like, so if you don't make this agreement in Istanbul, we'll take Sumy too. Okay, well, good luck with that. It just didn't work out for you. So they're redeploying those forces from Sumy. I think a fall offensive's coming. I don't know that they're going to be any more successful. We'll see what happens, but I don't know. How do you break through? Neither side can actually maneuver, and the defense has the upper hand as far as, I mean, it's better to be a defender than to be an attacker. So
no, that's true. I don't see any way for the Russians to break through in any sort of substantive way. I mean, to actually have an advance where they take territory, they really claim it, and they hold it for more than 72 hours, I think is just improbable. But at the same time, that's why I'm always surprised with the U.S. press. It always says that things are going so well for the Russians. And I see no evidence for that, because economically it's a total disaster. On the battlefield, total disaster. In the Kremlin, it is a mess. We see the infighting in Russia. We see the arrest of the oligarchs, the arrest of generals. We see more and more tension in their own society. They're running out of soldiers, and they're probably going to have to go for a mobilization. All these things are not good signs. So why is it we always hear that the Russians are just doing great? They're doing splendidly, and Ukraine is in need of desperate mercy. I don't see that. I see that Ukraine wants to end the war because it doesn't want to be in this war. It didn't start this war. But I don't see that they are forced into a position where there's no hope left, as the press makes it sound. In fact, it's the Russians who I think are a ticking time bomb. What do you think about all this?
Yeah, I think that the real issue is that they're believing their own press. I mean, they're seeding those kind of lines. Putin was doing that at Shanghai cooperation in that press conference just before Zelensky met with the Europeans of like, look how, I mean, they can barely keep this together. Okay, but you've taken 1% for 1 million casualties over the last 1,000 days. Like, I don't think you're doing so hot either. So, but they're believing their own lies that they have seeded. They're believing. I think, look, my shirt says fight like Ukrainians, right? I mean, if you're Ukrainian and the enemy's in front of you and your family's behind you, you're pretty motivated. You're in it, right? I mean, like, I don't think that the Russians feel anything like that. And, the morale that they bring, because they care about their families and everything that they grew up with, it's just a very different thing than if you're an invader there because you got a big bonus. So I don't see it going well for the Russians in that regard.
No, I don't either. And it's actually sort of interesting about that. You're absolutely right about the morale on two sides being totally different. Is I have asked a lot of people, like Chuck Farr from Kiev Post, what he thinks about this. He is the former Navy SEAL squadron leader, and he's written a lot of books about military history and things. But anyways, I've asked him, what is it exactly? Why are the Russians just sending these guys off in just waves, and they all get killed? Like, what does that show you? What's the plan? Is they're not making any progress? Can you imagine just days on end running through thousands upon thousands of soldiers and making no progress and doing nothing differently? And his conclusion, which probably makes the most sense, is your officers are told simply, today, you have to make 3 assaults. We didn't say you had to make progress. You have to make 3 assaults. So you decide, okay, 10 a.m., 12, and 2 p.m., or we're going to be doing assaults today. And everyone gets killed. You said, hey, listen, it's tough out there, but we did the assaults as we were ordered. That's all they're judged upon. There's nothing else. And the fact is, there's no one in Moscow that has a plan. There's no general in Moscow sitting there twiddling his thumbs going, I wish they'd ask me what I think, because I have a great idea of how to take Kiev. And they don't have such a person. If they did, they would have tried it by now. They don't have any idea of what to do. And it's amazing that the Russians, though, continue to drive this narrative that they are, quote unquote, winning. They're quite obviously not winning.
It strikes me like the old Soviet factories producing things that people didn't actually want because, hey, we just had a quota of this is what we had to produce. It's just the same thing, just translated to modern times with the military, and so it's not calculated to actually work. On the other side, I give the Ukrainians, who are outnumbered by GDP and outnumbered by landmass and outnumbered by population, great credit for being pretty crazy innovative. I mean, technologically innovative, entrepreneurial in the way that they are approaching things. They're not perfect, and they still have some of the Soviet hangover, but the way that they iterate and improve things at such a rapid pace, it's just astounding. And so, I mean, that gives them back a lot of the disadvantage they eat away at with each innovative, entrepreneurial, technological improvement.
Absolutely. No, and that's a huge difference is look at the innovation on the Ukrainian side. It's constantly, we see news coming out, this new drone can do something remarkable that 6 months ago, nobody thought was even possible. There's constantly something coming out on the Ukrainian side. And you see there's a lot of support for the Ukrainian side. Look at how many people are watching our YouTube channels. And we see that there's a strong support in the West. In Russia, on the other hand, there's not. The Russian population is not watching this en masse. They don't want to know about it.
Let me ask you something. I drive down the street, and I'm in a pretty red state, right? Red, conservative, Republican. I see a Ukrainian sticker here on a car. I see it on a shop window. I see it flying on a flag post, that sort of thing. I mean, just wherever I go, I see it periodically here or there. I've yet to see a Russian sticker or flag or anything anywhere. Like, I don't know about your experience, but I have yet to see it.
Well, given that I live in Kiev, I've not seen any Russian flags.
No. I mean,
but in general, I agree with your point. No, and I totally agree. In the U.S., there's no support, and in Europe, for that matter, is not either. I can't imagine seeing a person from Europe or the U.S. having a Russian flag. That being said, I had a very interesting incident at the German airport, at Frankfurt Airport. Just recently, there was a man who I noticed from a distance. He was wearing a shirt.
Oh, were you the tattoo one?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
This guy had a tattoo that seemed strange. I said, that looks a lot like an insignia that I recognize. So as I got closer, I realized that it was a Russian VDV, so it's paratrooper, airborne. And so I was looking at his tattoo, and it had the slogan and everything else of the name of the division. And I said, that's so interesting. So he's not ashamed to walk around with this. And I guess that most people probably can't read it, or they don't know what the logo is, so it doesn't really mean anything. I guess only other Russians would sort of pick up on it, or Ukrainians perhaps, but nobody else would. But I was very surprised that somebody would just walk around like that and wasn't scared. Sort of shameless, but also sort of, I think, it shows you the attitude of Russians. This sort of, nagli is the word in Russian, but it means to be sort of, where you have you're shameless. Shameless is just the word. We'll just say shameless. Where you just have no ability to recognize how out of place your actions are from what would be the norm. And that is what it is. But it is shocking to me that these sorts of people are allowed to walk around Europe, that they're given visas to enter Europe is just shocking to me. I really don't understand it.
Yeah, he looked like he was in about as good shape as anyone on the front.
Yes, he did not look like he was in great shape. But this is sort of the funny part.
I know 5 fat people, and he's like 4 of them. Like that guy was just.
But, I mean, I gotta say, for being airborne division, he did not look like the role you imagine. He did not look like G.I. Joe. But but it is sort of amazing is that these sorts of people are just running around Europe, and it's actually I've known a number of Ukrainian migrants, or I should say, people who have fled the war and now located in Germany and other countries. But it's specifically in Germany, I have just one friend there specifically who comes to mind, former colleague before the war, where she has encountered now 2 or 3 times Russians or people that perhaps are German citizens but are from Russia or speak Russian, who have on things like caps or shirts supporting the Russian military, which is just really surprising to me because I can't really fathom seeing that in the U.S.
Yeah, I have not seen anything like that in the U.S. And I think there in that scenario, it's another thing of the believing their own press. Like we're this great powerful thing. You're not that big and bad. Like you're the 5th economy in Europe. You're the 12th in the world, like or 11th or 12th, something like that in the world. Like you're not really just that tough. Like they see themselves as this great big thing, greater than China. China dwarfs you on so many measures, right? I mean, it's that sort of thing. But they believe their own press, and one of the things that they are really good at is their social media and their the way that they can disseminate their messaging. So they just do a great job in that, and then that's what they're trying to push in a narrative that we're hearing. That's what they're believing. I think that's what accounts for it, but I don't know. I mean, maybe there's just some kind like Germans are an interesting group as well, because there's like a part of like East Germany that's kind of sympathetic to Russia with some kind of weird Stockholm syndrome or something. Because like you would think that they would be like the least interested, like in like the Baltic states and Poland are the least interested in being anywhere around Russia. But somehow there's some weird German sympathy that I'm not sure exactly how to account for.
There's a ton of people who emigrated to Germany after the collapse of the Soviet Union who are ethnic Germans, Volga River Germans, these sorts of things, who are living in different parts. A lot of them are in Central Asia, actually, but a lot of them are also mixed with Russian population, and they were allowed to emigrate to Germany. So a lot of them were actually born in the former USSR, and then they moved there. So they are German citizens today, given the number of years they've been there, but they have this attachment to Russia, which is this nostalgia, I guess we call it. Nostalgia for what it was. And it's just this, it's such a great country, and it had such power, and Russia, won World War II, their favorite topic. It won World War II. This is by far Russia's favorite topic, which is sort of not exactly fully historically accurate, but neither here nor there. This is something that they love to talk about. And just get them started on that topic, they'll go day and night. They do not shut up about it.
Yeah, it's interesting how much they love talking about the Nazis while they double down on authoritarianism at home. It hurts my head to watch, really. I mean, it's just no. I know that you're railing against what that was, and what that was bad, but what it is not, and what you are is becoming increasingly worse, and they can't seem to see that. It's really bizarre.
Well, it is weird they don't see the parallels. They don't see the parallels because, I mean, when we look at why they hate the Germans, or I should say the Nazis, it's actually not for the crimes committed within Germany. That part they don't really talk about. They don't really seem to care about that part, or what happened to occupied Poland, for instance. But what they really care about, and they love to talk about, is the fact that they got invaded by the Germans. And so they talk about that day and night, that Russia stood up to them, leaving out the whole thing that they had the Molotov-Ribbentrop agreement, that they were actively working with the Germans to divide up
It's
Europe.
the Great Patriotic War.
Exactly.
It's not World War II.
Exactly.
That's
So
just
we have to
Western
separate these
propaganda.
But the fact is that they seriously believe this. They don't, and they know. You would think for a population so large, there'd be more and more people just go, this doesn't really add up. These numbers, they don't really make a lot of sense. But one of the things I've always enjoyed in the former Soviet states, I lived for 4 years in Kyrgyzstan, the Kyrgyz Republic. And so we still had back then a ton of Soviet monuments that had not been taken down. And I'm sure they've not been taken down still today. In fact, the statue of Vladimir Lenin in downtown Bishkek is protected by law and can never be taken down. But neither here nor there. The signs, what I always got a kick out of, the narrative of World War II in the Soviet period was, and on the signs, or I should say on the statues, it would say, in the case of one in Bishkek, they went to war for communism, and communism defeated fascism, is, I guess, rough translation. Now, what's interesting about that is there's no more communism. So communism was the reason that they won the war, according to the statues they had from the post-World War II era. But now they don't have communism. So they didn't say it was the ethnic Russians. They didn't say it was Russia. It was communism that defeated fascism. But now that there's no longer communism, who defeated fascism? Well, they've decided to just put that on themselves. In fact, it wasn't the communist ideology that was victorious over the fascist ideology. It was the ethnic Russians who were able to defeat the ethnic.
They do seem to believe that, don't they?
They do. They certainly do.
There really is a revanchism or revenge narrative here. I mean, there really is that kind of, and like an outsider who's been snubbed by the elites, and trying to show them I'm really one of you, like that, like that seems to be what's at play here within Russia. It's a very strange thing to watch as well.
It's very strange. Russia is a very strange country as a whole. I think it's fair to be said. And actually, it's sort of funny. When I was in college, more than 20 years ago, I remember a professor of Russian history who said, if you want to define all of Russian history, it's just really a fight against backwardness. How do we become less backward? How do we become more like a European country? And it is true. I mean, whether it's look at their influence of Peter the Great, for instance, who traveled a lot in Europe,
right?
Built the canals, built St. Petersburg. You look at someone like Catherine the Great, who was actually from Germany, but you look at all these different things, the influence that was the European influence was something they all aimed for. When you read Pushkin, you buy the book in Russian, in Russia, which I have, there's Pushkin, when he wrote it, a lot of the text that goes before the actual stanzas is written in French. He wrote French without a problem, fluently. And so a lot of the elites, and a lot of the books actually, when you look at the other classic literature in Russian, a lot of the introductions are written in French because there's just an assumption that you would be able to read it. Keep in mind, the common people weren't reading this. They they know how to read and write. So this was written for the elites, the nobility, and even look at the Tsar Nicholas II. His wife was also a foreigner. And so the Tsar and his family didn't speak in Russian to each other. Actually, he wrote in his diaries he was excited the first time that she wrote a sentence without a grammatical mistake in Russian. So it shows you it was not natural to them. They were very natural for them to speak foreign languages. In fact, his letters to his cousin, who became the King of England, were written, of course, in English. So it is sort of interesting to see how much that what they strive for, what was aspirational, was European, not Russian.
We want to be you, but we hate you.
Exactly. It's a very weird.
We want to be you. Yeah.
It's a jealousy. It's the way you described it. Exactly that. It's a sort of jealousy. They're snubbed. I want to be just like you, but I hate you because I can't be like you. And so it's a really weird sort of thing.
To bring it full circle, this is a Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting just the other day. I mean, that's what that was. Like, that meeting was like, well, we're going to be multipolar because we're look at the size of our population. Well, China and India, you got half the world right there, right? But like, but look at we want to be this. It's the same narrative. It's just history repeating itself again and again and again and again.
History does repeat itself. That's really interesting. Professor Gerdes, it was great talking with you today.
Thanks for having me.